Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to the Quick Start Guide for Recovery from Addiction and Co-Occurring Disorders. We are going to continue talking about vulnerability, awareness, and prevention. In this unit, we're going to talk about cognitive vulnerability, awareness, and prevention. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn-Elise Snipes. In this unit, we're going to explore how pessimism and unhelpful thoughts contribute to addiction, anxiety, anger, and depression, and then identify some strategies to address them. Let's start with pessimism. Pessimism encourages you to be on high alert for threats. It causes you to view life through a negative filter, expecting the worst in situations and people. Think about a time when you were pessimistic. You were just being a negative Nelly. You expected everything to go wrong. People did things you often probably assumed that it was malicious or they did it on purpose. Now think about a time when you were in a good mood, when you were feeling optimistic. How did that change your perception of events as they happened? And what things were you more alert to? Generally, when we're in an optimistic mood, we're more alert to the positive things that are in our environment, and we're not hyper vigilant. We're not hyper aware, scanning for the next shoe to drop. So spend about 30 minutes and identify at least 10 pessimistic thoughts that you have about life, your recovery, or other people. So that'll take a little bit of time. Explore how each one of those pessimistic thoughts make you more vulnerable or trigger anxiety, anger, depression, or addiction. In this activity, you're going to build on what you just thought about with pessimism. And we're going to talk about different types of unhelpful thoughts. Unhelpful thoughts basically take facts and stretch them out of proportion in some way, or shade or cover up the facts. So there are three basic ways to deal with unhelpful thoughts. You can empathize with the other person and explore alternate explanations. You can find exceptions, or you can find facts. So let's talk about how each one of those works. One common thinking error is personalization, assuming that somebody who scowled at you was angry at you, assuming that somebody was blaming you for something, or blaming yourself for something that probably wasn't your fault. Adds a lot of stress to your life. When you find that you're personalizing things, it's important to explore alternate explanations. What are three other explanations why this might be happening? If the cashier at the grocery store was rude to you, empathize with that person and think, what are three reasons why she might have been rude that had nothing to do with me? Maybe she just got written up, or her kid got suspended from school, or her car broke down. Those are three reasons she may be in a crappy mood and be not as polite as normal. The next thinking error is called extreme thinking, sometimes called all or nothing thinking. It's when you use exaggerated words like always or never, all or nothing. It's important to recognize that most things in life don't happen 100% of the time. So when you feel like you always get the short end of the stick, when you feel like things always go bad for you or never go right for you, okay, it may feel like that at the moment. That's emotion-based reasoning. So let's take a step back and let's find some exceptions to what you're saying. So if you're saying something always happens, let's look at times when it hasn't happened. Like, you always leave the litter box for me to change. Well, let's think about some times when the person actually did change the litter box. Most things don't happen all the time. So it's helpful to find exceptions, but also to choose less extreme language, like most of the time or frequently. That may be accurate, but rarely is it going to be always or never. And then the last set of cognitive errors have to do with not having enough facts for one reason or another. Emotional reasoning is when a person fears something And they assume that because they fear it, it's scary, like, or threatening or dangerous, like flying or snakes or roller coasters. What are the facts to support the notion, to support the belief that this is actually dangerous? Flying is actually, when you look at the facts, is actually safer than driving in a car. So emotional reasoning trips us up a lot of times because we assume, because we feel a certain way, that it must be dangerous. Catastrophizing, we do it. When something happens and all of a sudden we feel like it's the end of the world. This happened and, maybe you lost your job. So you catastrophize and assume that since you lost your job, there's that never word, you'll never get a job again. You're going to be evicted and you're going to be living under a bridge. All right, that is the catastrophic, the worst case scenario. But what is the likelihood? Let's find the facts there. What are the facts in this situation? What is the likelihood that you are completely powerless to prevent the worst case scenario? Even when hurricanes come, for example, that's even less in your control. Catastrophizing would be assuming that the hurricane's going to come, it's going to tear off your roof, and you're going to have water penetration, and you won't be able to afford it, and you're going to grow mold in the house. You can see where this goes, and you can get yourself all riled up with catastrophizing. But let's look at the facts. What is the likelihood that all that's going to happen? And what steps can you take to do as much prevention as possible? Mental filtering is another unhelpful thought style. In mental filtering, you only see one aspect. So if you're expecting something to go wrong, you only see the bad in it. Now, if you're expecting things to go right, you may only see the good. That even only seeing the good can be a problem. For example, in a relationship, if you're in a really dysfunctional relationship, but all you see is the good in this person, then it might end up leading you back towards relapse eventually. So it's important to see the good and the bad. It's important to see all aspects of a situation. Minimization is another one we talk about a lot in addiction recovery. Minimization, rationalization, and denial are some key thinking styles. Minimization can be harmful to you when you minimize the impact of something on you, like you minimize how dangerous it is to go to a bar, or you minimize how likely it is that this particular person is going to, increase your stress levels. Minimization means you're ignoring the facts. You're just pretending the facts aren't there and you're going, that's not that big of a deal. Minimization can bite you in the butt. Jumping to conclusions and assuming is yet another unhelpful thinking style. A lot of times we assume somebody did something, or we jump to conclusions based on very limited evidence. Your significant other comes home and they smell like somebody else's cologne or perfume. You may jump to the conclusion that they were having an affair. Well, how did you get from cologne or perfume to that? There are a lot of other potential alternate explanations, but it's important to find the facts, not assume that you know the end result. Mind reading is the final unhelpful thinking style that we'll talk about. And as it says, assuming you know what somebody else is thinking, what their motivations are. And this can come from, when you're talking to somebody and you just finish their sentences because you know what they were going to say. And I use know in quotes. You don't know what they were thinking or they were going to say. So it's important not to engage in mind reading and jump to conclusions and assume you know what they're thinking or what they want. Part of addressing mind reading is, again, finding the facts. Ask the person, what are your thoughts on this? Or just shut up long enough to listen and hear what they're saying instead of assuming you know where they're going when they're talking about something. So spend about an hour, each one of these, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 unhelpful thinking styles. So that's plenty to fill up an hour. Categorize your pessimistic thoughts from the last activity in the different categories: personalization, extreme thinking, emotional reasoning, catastrophizing, mental filtering, minimization, jumping to conclusions and assuming, and mind reading. Now, your pessimistic thoughts can fall into multiple different categories. That's possible that you'll have a thought in multiple areas. That's okay. Once you categorize them, using either alternate explanations, exceptions, or fact-finding, restate each of those pessimistic thoughts in more helpful and more moderate terms, and see how changing your phrasing and changing your perception of something, instead of being extreme or maybe based in emotion, see how that might impact your recovery and your likelihood to feel anxious, angry, hopeless, helpless, or feel the need to numb some of those feelings with addictive behaviors. Thoughts trigger emotional reactions. Pessimistic or unhelpful thoughts trigger unnecessary distress, which can trigger anxiety, anger, addiction, and/or depression. When you're in a bad mood, it's easy to lapse into pessimistic thinking. So it's important to remain aware of both your thoughts and your emotions in your recovery process.